As I'm sure most of you know, March was a really busy month for game releases, and I decided I would take some time to talk about the one release that no one is talking about for March, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands. I wasn't really paying much attention to this game until the beta a month or two before it came out, and I figured that I enjoy Siege enough that it's worth giving another Tom Clancy title a shot. I wanted to see how Ubisoft did now that their Golden Goose Assassin's Creed is seemingly missing in action. Now, it should be obvious from anyone who is looking at the footage that it is very different from the old Ghost Recon games, and it's very different from Future Soldier and Advanced Warfighter. It's obviously taken a lot of influence from open-world games like Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, but most notably Metal Gear Solid 5. And I think Ubisoft has figured out what the right things to pick and choose were when they were cobbling this game together. I found myself approaching a lot of the enemy bases in this game a lot like I would have in Phantom Pain, carefully marking everything with my binoculars, or in this case your aerial drone, and then formulating a plan of who to pick off first. Obviously there's no non-lethal options in this game, but stealth is still a very practical way to play, given that most enemies die in one shot. It's easy to describe this game as Phantom Pain with bigger areas, more vehicle use, and co-op. One big change they did make is that there's no returning to base at all in this game. If you just want to use new weapons or level up your character to get better abilities, you just do it all in the menu, which doesn't exactly feel immersive, but it really cuts down on time spent doing nothing. You will always be exploring, traveling, fighting, doing the most important aspects of this game. Another big reason for that is, even though the map is obviously a hell of a lot bigger than Phantom Pain's, it's much more compartmentalized. The cartel-ruled Bolivian landscapes are split up into provinces, which are all run by a boss who has several missions you need to do before you can take them on. They also house their share of collectibles like new weapons, attachments, upgrades, etc., and they've made sure that each province has roughly the same amount of content, regardless of how big they are, and I'd say that their sizes are fairly manageable. So you're not going to be running from one side of the map to the other like you might do in the later parts of a Grand Theft Auto game. You're going to be exploring an area, finding everything there is to do there, and then move on. And they take you a decent amount of time to do. I think that these things really help make the game fun, especially with friends. You might not want to do co-op your first time because the allied AI is pretty decent, but you don't really have a lot of tactical influence over them. They're just extremely good at killing whatever you tell them to shoot. But as long as you have friends with you, I think that you will get a lot more mileage out of this game. It's providing something that you don't see a lot of other open world games do. It does have its share of issues though. The controls for driving are probably not going to be to everyone's liking. And while I definitely got used to the flying controls, the fact that there's no way to yaw or rotate the aircraft with, say, the shoulder buttons means that using the stick to do everything feels incredibly awkward and simplistic, especially since enemy forces do have surface-to-air missiles that they might try to shoot you with. It feels really fun to dodge missiles, but I just wish my controls were better so I could do it more efficiently. Those missiles are a pretty good example of something that this game is definitely looking to Phantom Pain for, which was the idea of enemies adapting to your presence. Now, they don't adapt like they do in Phantom Pain, where the game will spawn in things that counter what you're using. But as you move through more difficult provinces, you'll find yourself coming up against things that jam your UAV, making it a lot harder to do recon, those missiles that I've mentioned, snipers. I think that these are really great additions that help put you on your toes, because going around attacking the same low-level bases for a little while can become repetitive. Another thing about the game that's kind of weird is that it has a lot of civilians. These are something that obviously you don't really come across in Far Cry, and especially Metal Gear. They're all over the place here, and they barely react to your presence. I wish they had more interesting AI, more complicated AI. I mean, you can be running through a settlement where there are bad guys to take out, and they can see you loaded up with all your guns, and they don't really react. They don't tip off the cartel. I think it would definitely increase the challenge if they did, but I would have liked a nice middle ground where they at least do a little more than just kind of stare at you. The story in this game isn't really anything to write home about, but it has a pretty solid level of optional exposition that's presented to you that makes it a little more believable than you might think. I understand that some people have been kind of critical of the premise, saying that it's disrespectful to the country of Bolivia and Latin America in general, saying that it promotes jingoism. I mean, it's a Tom Clancy game, so that's partially to be expected. I'll just say that I think if you know your history about the CIA and the kinds of things that they've done, then you notice that I think the writers were aware of that and how they wanted to portray the ghosts and their goal in this country. I think the fact that they're only intervening to stop this horrible cartel because a CIA mole was killed by them is telling. I think that they know what they're doing here. This isn't an all-American adventure. It's meant to be dubious. But most of the story is just kind of window dressing. It's an excuse to do these missions, and it won't get in your way. There's very little cutscenes. This actually adds to the game's core exploration elements because when you're going into a new province, you're going to be looking for intel that tells you where the missions are, but if you just happen to drive by the site of a mission, your characters will immediately know and you can just start the mission right there without having to go into any kind of loading screens or cutscenes or anything. That's really fun. If you like military action games and you're looking for a good single-player co-op experience, I would definitely recommend Wildlands. Maybe when it goes down in price a little, or if you don't like any of the games that have come out recently, you're probably going to be better off picking this up now. Ubisoft is trying to expand the content in the game by adding some kind of weekly challenge system, and I think there is an expansion coming out very soon. Really, the only big red flags that I can think of with this game is that it does have a premium currency that you can use to buy certain cosmetic items and automatically buy all the weapon upgrades. There's literally no reason to do this. It's not intrusive, they don't shove its presence in your face, but I just don't get why it's in the game at all. It's like if you saw it in Far Cry 3 or something. It wouldn't make sense because it's not a game as a service. But I have heard that they're planning on adding a PvP multiplayer mode, so this could all change relatively soon. I wouldn't say this is anywhere close to the extent of the changes that have happened to Siege, but it is interesting how Ubisoft seems to be rapidly trying to beef up the content in Wildlands for free. So if anything, I would recommend waiting until these new features are added so that you'll get a little bit more value out of the game.